In September 1925, James Deering died aboard the SS City of Paris, leaving behind an impossible dream made real, a Renaissance palace rising from Florida's mangrove swamps. For 10 years, he had poured his industrial fortune into creating Vizcaya, importing centuries-old European treasures and employing a small army of artisans to carve a paradise from the wilderness. But even as the champagne flowed at his legendary parties, forces were gathering that would threaten to erase his masterpiece from existence, and the Great Miami Hurricane would strike within months. Next, the Great Depression would empty its halls, and development would consume its grounds. By 1952, this architectural marvel, one of the most ambitious private residences ever built in America, stood on the brink of destruction. What happened next would not only save a mansion, it would help define Miami's cultural soul. Thus, in today's episode, we'll explore how one city fought to preserve its greatest architectural treasure and the price it paid to keep that dream alive, as we describe. Vizcaya Museum: How Miami Saved Its Gilded Age Mansion from Demolition. In the early years of the 20th century, as Miami emerged from its cocoon as a modest trading post into a burgeoning winter retreat for America's wealthy, James Deering stood at the helm of an ambitious vision. The heir to the Deering-McCormick International Harvester fortune didn't merely want a winter home. He sought to transplant the grandeur of European aristocracy onto Florida's subtropical shores. Deering's fascination with Italian Renaissance and Baroque architecture wasn't a passing fancy. He spent years traversing Europe, meticulously studying the architectural details of centuries-old villas, accompanied by Paul Chalfin, who would become the artistic director of the entire project. Together, they absorbed the subtle interplay of light and shadow in formal gardens, while acquiring an extensive collection of European antiquities. His dream crystallized through countless conversations with architect F. Burrell Hoffman and Chalfin, who shared his vision of creating not just a house, but a complete work of art. Construction began in 1912, transforming 180 acres of dense mangrove swamp into an architectural masterpiece. The process was nothing short of heroic. Hundreds of workers labored in Miami's punishing heat, using barges to transport limestone and coral rock quarried from the site. The main house rose from the shore of Biscayne Bay like a Venetian palace transported through time and space, its massive walls and intricate details emerging day by day, stone by stone. In 1914, the project gained another visionary when Deering and Chalfin met landscape designer Diego Suarez in Florence. Suarez would bring his expertise to the formal gardens, adding another layer of European sophistication to the estate. The resulting villa seamlessly merged Mediterranean revival and Italian Renaissance styles, but with a crucial difference from its European counterparts. The team understood that this wasn't Europe. It was Miami, with its unique climate and character. They incorporated local materials and tropical motifs throughout the design, creating something entirely new, a synthesis of old-world grandeur and new-world vitality. Between 1914 and 1922, the estate took its final form. Deering officially began occupancy on Christmas Day 1916, though work continued for years afterward. The villa became the nucleus of Miami's social scene, with Deering hosting an endless parade of guests: European nobility, American industrialists, artists, and intellectuals. They arrived to find a stone barge serving as a breakwater in Biscayne Bay, an architectural folly that doubled as a venue for elegant parties. Each room they entered revealed new treasures: 15th-century carpets, Renaissance furniture, rare artworks, all arranged with careful consideration rather than mere ostentation. But Vizcaya was more than a stage for social pageantry. In its synthesis of European and American sensibilities, in its audacious transformation of wilderness into carefully cultivated beauty, it represented something profound about the American Gilded Age itself. Here was the raw ambition of the New World, dressed in the refined garments of the old, creating something that belonged fully to neither tradition. As the last champagne glasses were being cleared away from yet another glittering soirée, none of the revelers could have guessed that this golden moment was about to end, or that forces beyond their control would soon threaten to erase Deering's masterpiece from existence. The death of James Deering in September 1925 marked more than the passing of a man. It signaled the end of an era for Vizcaya. In the gathering darkness of his final days aboard the SS City of Paris, Deering could not have known that his masterpiece would soon face threats far greater than any he had anticipated. The estate passed to his nieces, Marion Deering McCormick and Barbara Deering Danielson, who would soon face unprecedented challenges in preserving their uncle's vision. The first blow came swiftly and violently. Just 1 year after Deering's death, the Great Miami Hurricane of 1926 swept through the estate with devastating force. The storm surge from Biscayne Bay battered the ornate stone barge and flooded the grounds, while fierce winds damaged the carefully manicured gardens. This natural disaster, combined with the subsequent collapse of Florida's land boom, marked the beginning of a long period of decline for Vizcaya. The Great Depression that followed transformed Miami's economic landscape. The vast staff required to maintain the estate, the gardeners who pruned the formal hedges, the maintenance workers who kept the fountains flowing, the housekeepers who preserved the delicate furnishings, became an increasingly unsustainable expense. One by one they were let go, leaving the estate to face Miami's harsh elements with minimal defense. Nature began its slow reclamation. The humidity that had always been Vizcaya's enemy crept deeper into its walls. Salt spray from Biscayne Bay corroded the intricate ironwork. Mold bloomed on centuries-old tapestries, while insects found homes in antique furniture. The carefully planned gardens, once maintained with mathematical precision, grew wild and unruly. In the 1930s, recognizing the estate's deteriorating condition, Deering's nieces took an important step. They invited Paul Chalfin, the estate's original artistic director, to return and help prepare Vizcaya for its potential future as a museum. The post-war years brought new pressures to the estate. Miami's rapid development in the 1940s transformed the city, and Vizcaya's extensive grounds became increasingly valuable. In 1945, 20 years after Deering's death, the first significant portion of the property was sold for the construction of Mercy Hospital. This marked the beginning of a gradual reduction of the estate's grounds, as pieces of Deering's original vision were carved away to make room for Miami's expansion. By the early 1950s, Vizcaya stood at a crossroads. The main house still contained its treasures, but their condition deteriorated with each passing season. The remaining grounds grew more untamed, and the spectre of total loss loomed ever larger. For those who understood Vizcaya's significance, the question was no longer whether the estate could be preserved exactly as Deering had left it. That opportunity had already passed. The question now was whether anything could be saved at all. As Miami raced toward its future as a modern metropolis, the fate of this monument to a more gracious age hung precariously in the balance, awaiting either salvation or the wrecking ball. The turning point in Vizcaya's history came not through a single dramatic gesture, but through the gradual awakening of Miami's civic consciousness. By the early 1950s, a group of local historians and cultural advocates began to see what the city stood to lose. Not just a mansion, but a unique architectural bridge between the old world and the new, between Miami's pioneer past and its emerging identity as a major American city. These preservationists understood that Vizcaya represented something irreplaceable, a masterwork of adaptation, where European architectural traditions had been reimagined for Florida's tropical environment. In 1952, these preservation efforts culminated in a bold move by Miami-Dade County, which purchased the main house and its surrounding grounds from Deering's nieces for $1 million. The price represented a fraction of the estate's true value, but the family's decision to accept this offer revealed their understanding of Vizcaya's broader cultural significance. They chose the promise of preservation over the possibility of greater profit, ensuring that their uncle's vision would survive in some form. The transformation from private estate to public institution began immediately. The property, which included the main house and its spectacular 10 acres of formal gardens, would become the Dade County Art Museum. Years of exposure to Florida's subtropical climate had left their mark on the property. Salt-laden air had corroded metalwork, and humidity had affected precious textiles. The county faced the daunting task of not just preserving what remained, but of understanding and documenting the original intention behind every detail of the estate's design. The groundwork for this preservation had actually begun years earlier, in the 1930s, when Paul Chalfin had returned at the invitation of Deering's nieces. His expertise had proved invaluable then in simplifying the garden's maintenance while preserving their essential character. This earlier guidance, combined with the careful documentation of the estate's original features, would provide crucial reference points for future preservation efforts. The museum opened its doors to the public in 1953, marking the beginning of a new chapter in Vizcaya's history. Visitors could now wander through rooms that had once hosted private gatherings of America's industrial elite, examining up close the artistic and architectural details that James Deering had so carefully assembled. The formal gardens, though encompassing just 10 acres, offered a remarkable example of landscape design adapted to Florida's unique climate and vegetation. But opening the museum was only the beginning. The same subtropical environment that had made Miami an attractive winter destination also posed constant threats to Vizcaya's preservation. The marriage of European architectural traditions with Florida's climate, once so innovative, now presented unique conservation challenges. As Miami's preservation community celebrated this initial victory, they were already beginning to understand that saving Vizcaya would be not a single campaign, but a perpetual commitment. One that would require new strategies and resources that no one in 1953 could have imagined. The 1970s brought new recognition to Vizcaya's historical significance, nearly 2 decades after Miami-Dade County's pivotal acquisition of the estate. As the national consciousness about historic preservation awakened, sparked by the destruction of New York's Penn Station and the passage of the National Historic Preservation Act, Vizcaya gained formal recognition through its listing in the National Register of Historic Places in 1970. This designation marked another milestone in a preservation journey that had begun in the 1950s. The challenges facing the estate were growing more complex. The surrounding area, which had already seen significant development since the county's acquisition, continued to evolve. The city's growing pollution problems and increasingly extreme weather patterns posed new threats to the estate's preservation, requiring ever more sophisticated conservation approaches. The preservation work encompassed everything from the painstaking restoration of decorative elements to the installation of modern climate control systems designed to protect the collection while remaining invisible to visitors. Conservation specialists who understood both the principles of historical preservation and the unique challenges posed by Miami's climate worked tirelessly to maintain the estate's integrity while adapting to modern needs. These efforts extended beyond the main house to the formal gardens, where preservationists faced a different set of challenges. The original landscape design had relied on a delicate balance between formal European garden traditions and tropical plant species. Maintaining this balance required not just horticultural expertise, but an understanding of historical landscape design. Specialists worked to identify original plant species, restore damaged architectural elements, and develop sustainable maintenance practices that would preserve the garden's historical character while adapting to modern environmental conditions. In 1994, Vizcaya's importance in American architectural history received its highest formal recognition with its designation as a National Historic Landmark. This acknowledgement of the estate's exceptional significance came as preservation efforts were entering a new phase. The formation of the Vizcaya Museum and Gardens Trust in 1998 represented a critical evolution in the estate's management. For the first time, a dedicated organization existed solely to oversee Vizcaya's preservation and operation, bringing a new level of professionalism and focused attention to the estate's care. As Miami approached the millennium, Vizcaya stood as a testament to decades of preservation work. Yet even as the newly formed trust celebrated the successes of past preservation efforts, new challenges were emerging on the horizon. The rising waters of Biscayne Bay and increasingly violent storms would soon force preservationists to confront questions that James Deering and his designers could never have anticipated. Today, Vizcaya stands as something far more complex than James Deering could have envisioned when he first dreamed of his winter retreat. The estate has become a cultural nexus where Miami's past and future converge, where the preservation challenges of the present illuminate the innovative spirit of the original design. Nearly 300,000 visitors each year walk the grounds where Gilded Age industrialists once strolled, their footsteps tracing patterns through gardens that have endured nearly a century of Florida's mercurial climate. The estate's role has evolved far beyond that of a traditional house museum. Its collections and archives have become invaluable resources for scholars studying everything from early 20th century American architecture to historical methods of tropical garden design. The adaptation of European architectural traditions to Florida's climate, once viewed simply as an aesthetic choice, now offers crucial insights for contemporary architects grappling with questions of sustainable design in challenging environments. Yet Vizcaya faces threats that would have been unimaginable in Deering's time. The rising waters of Biscayne Bay, once merely a scenic backdrop, now pose an existential threat to the estate. Storm surges push further inland with each passing year, testing the limits of early 20th century engineering. The ornate stone barge, an architectural folly that has become one of Vizcaya's most recognizable features, stands as a silent witness to these changing conditions, its weathered surface marking the passage of time and tides. The preservation team has responded to these environmental challenges with the same innovative spirit that characterized the estate's original construction. Preservationists work continuously to protect the estate's historical materials from the effects of salt, moisture, and increasingly severe weather events. In the gardens, they face the delicate task of maintaining historical authenticity while adapting to changing environmental conditions that threaten both structures and plantings. Modern-day Miami has transformed the estate's surroundings dramatically since its Gilded Age heyday. Though always part of Coconut Grove, Vizcaya's grounds have shrunk from their original expanse, and the property's context has shifted from a more secluded setting to one firmly embedded in the urban fabric. As Vizcaya enters its second century, the question is no longer simply how to preserve a historical estate, but how to maintain its relevance in a changing world. Comment: are you a native of South Florida, and have you visited the estate?